The main obstacle in the socioeconomic development of the indigenous communities is their lack of governability. Governability in this case means the extent to which indigenous communities can be governed, and where the system to be governed is the population of the community. And the system of governance refers to the community chief and his team. In the Tukuna indigenous communities, we usually find a lack of leadership and leadership skills, a lack of vocation, a non-existent organizational structure, and overall disinterest from the population itself concerning issues that affect the community.
Como indígenas, nosotros siempre tenemos, o sea, no respondemos a, sí tenemos como esas ganas de trabajar, de hacerla, pero nos falta es como esa vocación, esa entrega, ese interés.
Tenemos un reglamento interno que no sabemos cómo aplicarlos. Hay un proyecto que a veces llega, pero no los aprovechamos porque no tenemos el conocimiento y que la gente a veces está desunida, no están tan unida. Bueno, esas cosas de comunidad.
In our study area, each community is led by a chief, the curaca, and a committee of 4 people composed of the vice curaca, the secretary, the treasurer, and the spokesperson, which together are referred to as the cabildo. All of its members must be people living in the community who are elected by popular vote, although it often depends on who has the most family members. The cabildo is supervised by the attorney of the community, and it bears mentioning that the curaca or the cabildo are not the ones making the decisions. All decisions are made democratically by the entire community. It is important to mention that Colombian law does not extend completely to these communities. The communities have the right to exercise their own judicial system, meaning that the cabildo is in charge of maintaining order in the community and applying sanctions. Carrying out these tasks in a community of 150 to 1,000 people can be tricky, especially if most of its members hail from just a few families. For example, if the curaca punishes a member of another family, they often will receive threats from that family. Or it could be the other way around. The curaca may not penalize someone from his own family. Adding to these difficulties is the fact that cabildos have to manage projects and funding from the government. In an area where income is scarce and education is one of the worst in the country, this usually means that a big portion of the funding will disappear and these projects will fail. This is the reason why it is so important to work on governability, to ensure that any kind of project can be carried to fruition, and this includes projects related to environmental conservation. Through funding by the Swedish Mission Council, we have worked for the past year and a half with 2 indigenous communities, San Antonio and San Juan. In both communities, we work with the cabildos, and in San Antonio, we also work with a group of primary school professors and a group of young adults. Each week, we organize various workshops and meetings with the different groups, which take place in the community itself or in Entropika's office. At the beginning of the project, the topics covered in the workshops were pretty open, meaning we had an idea of what we wanted to focus on, but the exact subjects depended on what the leaders of these communities needed to learn to do their job properly.
Más que todo como tesorera necesito como hacer cuentas, más que todo en matemática, que a veces somos como que es complicado uno sumar, multiplicar, dividir.
Por lo menos a mí me interesaría saber más cómo conocer de leyes, de estudiar más los artículos de la Constitución, porque es por eso es que nosotros a veces nos sentimos pisoteados por algunas autoridades del pueblo, porque desconocemos nuestros derechos.
As we began the workshops, we quickly discovered that their level of education was extremely low. We asked ourselves, how can they manage projects, government funds and people, or teach children if they do not even understand basic math, for example? Or if they can't even write a letter, how will they write a project proposal? Having identified this major obstacle, we decided to start with the basics of everything. Basic math, how to calculate percentages, accounting skills, what are invoices, how to write a letter, and then how to write a request of information to government institutions, all while learning how to use a computer. They had to write the letters, make expense ratios, etc. directly on a computer. a device most of them had never even touched before, but has proved to be one of the most important tools even they need. We've also taught workshops with the whole community, during which we mainly discuss Indigenous law and women's rights. Both of these topics have been well received by the community as it is of interest to them. However, it's not always easy to hold their interest, as some activities are tedious and they do not always see the necessity for improvement since things have always been done this way. Therefore, we always try to apply the workshops to a relevant topic at hand. For example, if the Cabildo needs to request information from the mayor's office about a project in the community, we teach them how a letter and a request of information are structured. They then learn and practice to write their request on the computer, and the next day they submit it to the mayor's office. Another example, they're currently carrying out a project with the national government on raising and selling chickens as a productive project. They need to keep track of the money they spend, so we teach them how to make an expense ratio using Excel, how to summarize these expenses, and know how much money is left in the bank account. Our main achievements so far with this part of the project are that San Antonio now has a manual of internal regulations, which was written last year together with the Cabildo and then presented to the community for approval. This document, which is 62 pages long, details in basic Spanish some of the rules to live peacefully in the community, as well as the sanctions that can be applied when rules are broken. The sanctions that were created can actually be applied in real life by the Cabildo. They are not punishments that the Cabildo will never be able to enforce. The community also accepted that major crimes such as homicide and sexual abuse will be taken directly to the national authorities. Now that the document exists, training continues in applying these internal regulations. The professors are slowly but surely learning how to better manage a program like PowerPoint to make their classes more interactive and interesting for their students. On top of that, they're improving their level of English through our workshops in order to better teach their classes. The youth group have been taught how to design, implement, analyze, and present a survey. They carried out a socioeconomic survey with the households of their community. They are currently being taught how to analyze these results and will soon present them to the leaders of the community. Interestingly enough, the leaders of these communities are now asking us directly for advice, and other communities have asked to join the program. This goes to show that the project is doing well.
Digamos, el fruto de esta capacitación puede ser un líder bien preparado y ya se puede parar en la raya y puede defender, él puede defender al pueblo.
Pues yo pienso que sí es importante para nosotros, ¿no? este proyecto. ¿Por qué? Porque a base de eso, digamos, nosotros como que somos de la comunidad, podemos gestionar a través de los proyectos, podemos, digamos, no necesitaríamos buscar ayuda por otros lados, sino ya, digamos, si nosotros manejamos la parte tecnológica, nosotros mismos podemos elaborar nuestros documentos, nuestros oficios o hacer proyectos para poder gestionar recursos o otras cosas que necesitamos.
Entropika es una ayuda, pero es que nosotros necesitamos eso, acá tenemos gente, tenemos jóvenes, tenemos personas pues que ya han tenido experiencias, pero más sin embargo han pasado por la mesa directiva y no saben qué es liderar, no saben qué es eso, entonces nosotros necesitamos eso, nosotros queremos eso, lo necesitamos.
The other main part of the project, funded by the Swedish Mission Council, is supporting the citizen oversight groups of the Amazon. A citizen oversight group is a democratic mechanism put in place to strengthen and empower civil society by providing a legal framework to access decision-making processes of the state, exercise vigilance on programs, projects, contracts, and public services managed or executed with public funds, as well as the compliance of state obligations concerning constitutional rights and the denouncement of irregularities.
Bueno, la importancia de las veedurías es la capacidad que tienen de ejercer control social sobre los fondos que el Estado y entes privados invierten en proyectos o contratos. Entonces, si no hay una veeduría que vea específicamente cómo se están utilizando estos fondos, en el departamento de Amazonas, por ejemplo, tenemos la experiencia que casi todos los fondos se desvían. Entonces son muy importantes para ejercer un control social.
High levels of corruption permit the misuse of public funds allocated to provide basic services for the Amazonas Department, such as health and education. Authorities grant extraction permits that affect ecosystems and local people. Entropika has been working to halt corruption in the environmental sector since 2016, when we created the Citizen Oversight Group dedicated to environmental protection. In June 2021, we spearheaded the formation of the network of citizen oversight groups of the Amazonas Department, and by democratic vote, Entropika Director Angela Maldonado was elected president. With the creation of this network, we aim to increase the capacity, participation, and vigilance skills of the members of the oversight groups.
Entonces nos dimos cuenta que al unirnos vamos a tener mejor capacidad de ejercer el control social. Y lo otro también es de protegernos, ¿no? No es un secreto que los veedores reciben amenazas por el trabajo que hacen. Entonces, lo que yo les decía es tener como tener una manada, ¿no? Protegernos los unos a los otros y apoyarnos cuando lo necesitamos.
Our preliminary results are, first, the creation of new oversight groups in Leticia and Puerto Nariño, encouraging the participation of young leaders. Second, networking to secure pro bono legal support for key cases from 3 oversight groups. Third, we improved citizen participation after we sued the Amazonas governor for not fulfilling his obligation to the local oversight groups, and we guarantee the investment of funds that must be used by the department to support the work of the oversight groups in the most remote regions of Amazonas.
¿Qué necesita la Redeva, la red de veedurías del Amazonas, para avanzar? Bueno, en primer lugar, estamos avanzando con la parte organizativa, pero tenemos unas limitaciones económicas. Por ejemplo, hicimos nuestra primera salida de campo a Puerto Nariño, donde creamos 3 veedurías, pero todos estos costos asociados al transporte, alimentación, hospedaje para poder ir hasta allá, pues hay que cubrirlos de alguna forma. Lo otro es que todo este es un trabajo voluntario, ¿no? Los veedores trabajamos de forma voluntaria y hay muchos veedores que realmente no tienen los recursos para hacerlo. Entonces eso disminuye muchísimo realmente las salidas a campo. El departamento del Amazonas es uno de los departamentos más grandes del país y tenemos sitios distantes, tenemos las zonas no municipalizadas, que son como lo que eran anteriormente corregimientos, que son zonas muy apartadas del departamento, principalmente con población indígena, donde sus derechos fundamentales están siendo vulnerados, como es la salud, la educación, acceso a agua potable. Entonces, parte de lo que quisiéramos hacer como Redeva en el futuro es tener veedurías en esas áreas no municipalizadas y fortalecer el control social y apoyar a la gente de esas zonas apartadas que son principalmente indígenas.
Pues el futuro de las veedurías depende de nosotros mismos, ¿sí? Depende de nosotros, que si hacemos las capacitaciones, si hablamos con la gente, si les pedimos que la colaboración. Yo por lo menos les he dicho aquí a varias personas, aquí unas obras que hay inconclusas, están inconclusas porque no han tenido el acompañamiento de la comunidad, ¿sí? Entonces el contratista no se pone, como se dice, las pilas para hacer la obra. Y los entes territoriales tampoco hacen cumplir las normas ni hacen cumplir los contratos.
Como sueño que sea la administración municipal y departamental del Amazonas. Son 2 cosas fundamentales, sin corrupción y con gente capacitada.
Ojalá ese sueño se vuelva realidad. Es donde no tengamos que estar empujando ni llamando la atención por la hechura de una calle, de una escuela, de un CDI, y lleguemos con la parte administrativa, ¿por qué no decirle, en vez de regañarlos, aplaudirlos cuando se esté inaugurando uno de estas infraestructuras o uno de estos eventos?
Primero que todo, que se acabe la corrupción, ¿sí? Que haya unos entes de control que sean eficientes y que se vean los resultados. Mientras no ocurra eso, es muy difícil, ¿sí?